Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of the Ghost Train. We thank everyone for watching. We are beginning of February, so close to March. Oh, so close. And but that doesn't mean anything because March can still be pretty lame too. Even the best years, the March is pretty lame. So, with me, as always, is the newly crowned lumberjack of the show, James Gastina. Look at that. Look at that white man's beard because it's white man's because he's got that big
Yeah.
missing patch on his left side. Yep. Ginger beard over there. That's what we're going to start calling you.
You start calling me Ginger Snap, you wouldn't be the first.
Okay. All right. So let's take a look at who we got with us today. Jeff is joining us again. Jeff, thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Of course, we'll have Chris Nuttall from Shreveport, Louisiana. Chris, glad we can have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Not a problem. And Ashley, is it Pauling or Poling?
Polling.
Polling. See, I should have asked before we started, but Ashley Poling from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. All right, guys. So we've had a little bit of discussion, kind of on the behind the scenes that I wanted to get out of the way because, and this kind of comes around to one of the biggest problems we have with our hobby, and that's the whole this group is too good for that group, or this chaser's too good to be a part of anything. And I'm not going to mention names or affiliations, but we started reaching out to people through our Facebook page, and a certain group of chasers kind of laughed us off as if we were either below them or just because we were part of, Storm Track. We're not exactly sanctioned under Storm Track. We do work side by side with Storm Track. That's kind of our plan. That was the whole thing with the before we got started with the show. That's what we're going to do is try to funnel traffic between the show and Storm Track, and that's why we always talk about them on the show. Well, and the problem I think is some chasers still have beef with other chasers, which I don't know why. To me, I always thought that the beef came from chasers who were making money against other chasers who were making money, and it was just kind of the business rivalry that kind of comes along. But to me, it feels like the whole business of storm chasing has now kind of gone downhill since maybe 2010, 2011, maybe. Streaming's on the decline. Video sales are harder to do, especially with more and more people just giving their stuff away for free. So, I guess if chasing was your way of life, then I could see why you're kind of bitter at everyone else who's still chasing, and you're here trying to struggle with some chasing funds and whatnot. So anyway, the whole reason I'm saying this is because I wanted everyone to know that this show does not give a flying fuck what you do with and how you chase or whatever. I don't care if you go out and do nothing but videotape damage pass, or if you're just a local spotter. I don't care. You can come on the show. You can tell us your stories, your experiences, your opinions. We leave all the feelings at the door before we start, and I don't think it's healthy for this hobby to have those people that have beef with each other, just the high and mighty versus the low lives and stuff. So, I'm guilty of it too. But hey, you know what? We rag on the noobs all the time because we were ragged on when we were noobs too. So, anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way because that was kind of bugging me ever since we tried to reach out to some guests. So, I don't know if any of you guys here in the room have any opinions on that in terms of chaser affiliation versus chaser affiliation.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm still a noob.
Yeah. I'm just a noob with like 8 years or 7 years of chasing behind me. So
That's pretty much my story right there.
yeah, I've never made a single dime off of chasing at all. So I don't know if that counts me as. Or y'all remember that whole argument about recreational chasers?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me. I'm a recreational, I guess.
As am I.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think we all are. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like people still have these beefs with other people, and I still don't understand why. And maybe because some business was conducted poorly or, left a bad taste in your mouth kind of deal. But that's fine. You know what? If you want to hold on to that rivalry, you go right ahead and live your life as a bitter person or just an asshole in general. I mean, that's your life. It's whatever you want to do. So all we're trying to do is bring the community together with this show. And like I said, this is like this show is the Switzerland of storm chasing because we're very neutral about everything. So I don't know. That was the only good reference I could think of. But anyway, so let's go ahead and get on with the show. Let's get on with some of the topics. One of the biggest topics that has been circulating the chasing community for probably about 2-3 years at least. About 3 years actually, is how the drought affects chasing. I know a lot of people hear about the drought. A lot of people wonder what exactly does it mean in terms of severe weather season, and it does affect the severe weather season quite a bit. That's why we have some rather smart people on this show, as in everybody else but me, to explain why this drought is such a big thing and what you can look forward to once that drought starts getting removed. So, Chris, we'll start with you, Chris. You used to work up here in Amarillo, and you know quite a bit about the drought and how it can affect us. What are your thoughts about how the drought really affects us and how it affects the chasing season in general?
Well, it's kind of a complex problem. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but you kind of have to think of it in terms of kind of several different levels. I mean, first, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. I mean, does the drought affect the chase season, or does the chase season affect the drought? Because a drought, by definition, is caused by a lack of precipitation. So if you're not getting rainfall, you're not getting thunderstorms. So which is it? I would argue to say that a slow chase season probably leads to a drought in some ways. Really it's one of those things, correlation does not necessarily equal causation. On the long term, kind of on the large scale pattern, I think the drought and a slow chase season are kind of symptoms of the same problem, because you're starting to look into things like the upper level patterns, what the tracks of the mid-latitude extratropical cyclones are, where the storm tracks are going, the upper troughs, the ridges, which in turn, if you get even bigger, is tied into things like El Nino and the Arctic Oscillation, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, how all those interact. Last year I think it was, we had a lot of late season Arctic intrusions into the plains. We kept getting these cold fronts in late March and even into early April, and they were sweeping all the way down to the Gulf and just scouring out the moisture and completely cutting off the southern plains from any kind of Gulf moisture source. Well, that's not really caused by the drought. That was caused by the long-term, large-scale upper flow patterns. Now, on the days when it may be borderline, you get a strong enough system and you get good moisture return in there, I think that's, you get 70-degree dew points in the Texas Panhandle, and that's probably going to be enough to overcome any kind of drought conditions that you have going on, because it's not like they're not getting, they're not having a complete lack of severe weather in the plains over the last few years. In 2007, which was a particularly bad fire year, they had plenty of tornadoes. In fact, I think that was the record year for the Amarillo County warning area as far as number of tornadoes recorded. When I worked out there, there was a drought going on, but I can remember plenty of times when there were some monster supercells dropping, some prolific hail out there. And I saw tornadoes out there too, so it's not like there's a complete lack of. Yes, I actually have seen tornadoes in the Texas Panhandle, since 2005. They do exist. So it's not like they're not, they're just all of a sudden in a severe weather void. Now, on the days when it's kind of borderline, it may be that the lack of soil moisture, you're not getting any evapotranspiration out of the soil and out of the vegetation, and that may help the dry line mix farther east faster and mix it farther into Oklahoma and out of the high plains. So, it kind of depends on what scale you're looking at. I think, like I said, on the days that it's borderline, as far as moisture return goes, that may be where you see the most impact, but that could be any given day, and is really one of those things that's on such a small scale, a micro scale type of a thing, that we can't really resolve in the numerical models at all. On the large scale, I think the drought doesn't cause a slow to severe weather season as much as they're basically, symptoms of the same thing, if that makes sense.
Right. So, like I said, everything has to work together to make it a perfect season, so to speak, or high count season, I guess. And a lot of it has to do with how much cold air we get late in the season. So, Jeff,
you could have,
you could
have, plenty of moisture, but if you don't have the upper level support, if you have a really strong cap in place, that's going to, kind of blow your chances out of the water too. Everything has to be in that fine balance somewhere in there, and all has to be there at just the right time.
Right. And I'm not saying the drought completely shuts down the season, but it definitely doesn't help when it comes to making sure the dry line doesn't mix out east, and but a lot of that has to do with also just how the entire day is set up. So, Jeff, let's talk about what happens maybe when there's not such a severe drought. Maybe some positives in that.
Well, I think Chris covered a lot of things pretty well here. The word that comes to my mind, at least in the academic and research community, is the word feedbacks, or feedbacks and interactions. And I think Chris stated it pretty well that there's a correlation between lame seasons and drought, but the causation isn't necessarily given one way or the other. Really, I think they both just kind of feedback off each other. Drought's kind of a vicious cycle, and usually when you have a drought, that means I'm going to get really technical here, so if I start spouting off vocabulary that people don't understand, I apologize, but this is kind of just how I talk when I'm getting into these technical discussions. But when you have a drought, you get more sensible heat flux, so that causes the surface temperatures to be warmer. It also causes the surface to be drier, so you get things like higher LCLs, drier boundary layers. Any storms that do form tend to be outflow dominant, or they just don't rain as much. And if you don't get as much rain, usually you're not getting as many clouds either. So if you have fewer clouds, that allows more solar radiation to reach the surface. That makes the surface hotter in turn. That makes it even harder and harder for thunderstorms to form. That keeps the soil dry, keeps it hot, and that basically just starts a positive feedback loop that just keeps adding to the problem. So the drought never really, it makes it hard to recover from. But I think Chris was kind of touching on that already, so I won't really dwell too much more into that. But Marcus, you asked me about what happens when drought's not so much of a problem. Well, when you said that, one particular year comes to mind, 2009. You guys remember what 2009 was like? Yeah, the death ridge in May. Record calm May. So here's what I remember from that year. I was a senior at Iowa State doing my bachelor's in meteorology that year, and I was paying a lot of attention to the synoptic scale pattern coming into that spring. And one of the big things I remember was throughout most of March and into April, the synoptic scale troughing was just insane. There were huge, strong troughs just progressing across the CONUS every probably 2 or 3 days. It's something that I don't think you usually see in the spring. It was really active. But the problem during that time was there wasn't as much moisture, and it was still March and April, so it was still a little bit early to get enough time for everything to recover. It wasn't necessarily that the moisture was being shunted all the way off into the Caribbean Sea or anything. I mean, it was still in the Gulf, but you only had a day or two to recover in between these big-time troughs that were coming through, and that just wasn't enough. Well, 2009 wasn't really a big drought year, and so there were a few events. Well, what was it, late April, 25th, 26th was it, the high-risk days in Oklahoma? Yeah. So there were definitely events early in the season. But then in May, there wasn't really a problem with the drought in May. It was just that these baroclinic instabilities just stopped. We stopped having any cyclogenesis. We had a ridge set up overhead, which is obviously overhead, but over the plains, which is obviously not common. But that's kind of the other side to this coin here. It's not enough just to have, plentiful rain and good soil moisture and lush vegetation. You need to have the trigger. You need to have the boundaries set up. You need to have the shear. You need to have the forcing mechanisms. And that was a problem in 2009. The forcing mechanisms just disappeared. And so even though it wasn't really a drought year and there was reasonable moisture, a season kind of got more or less destroyed by just poor synoptic scale flow. That we just weren't getting the cyclones that we're used to. So that's a good example of recent times of a drought not really mattering. If you don't have the other side of the coin there, you're still going to have kind of a bad season. And that's that's anomalous. Obviously, we haven't seen that really since 2009. I don't. Usually, if you have adequate moisture, that's going to, adequate precipitation, adequate soil moisture, your vegetation's going to be there. The dry line's going to be staying farther west. So any troughs that do come over are going to, there's a higher chance that they're going to give you a pretty good severe weather event. Whether it's linear or discrete cells, that's obviously a mesoscale or a storm scale kind of aspect. But you would generally expect to have more normal seasons when you have closer to average precipitation and not so much of a drought.
So it's not a huge difference between the two. I mean, you can have either kind of year depending on the drought. So, all right. So I'm learning. I don't know about you guys, but at home.
Yeah.
Definitely. Ashley, you learning too? Because I didn't know some of this stuff.
I mean, just because I'm more of a Dixie Alley person.
Yeah, you guys don't have to worry about that.
We don't deal with the dry line stuff.
Yeah, you guys got moisture all day long up there. So you lucked out, sort of, except you do have the crappiest chase terrain in the country, pretty much.
There's some decent spots.
Few and far between, but yes, you're right. James,
I feel your pain since I've moved to Shreveport 4 years ago. I haven't seen a dry line since then.
I bet that's got to be the hardest transition, going from a dry line dominant area to having to rely on just the cold fronts that are inching their way through. Chris.
Yeah.
By the time the fronts get here, though, they're usually moving pretty quickly because those upper troughs are starting to eject out into the plains. What's been difficult has been, being used to the isolated or scattered, supercells that I don't want to say are easy to look at on radar, but it's not like trying to deal with, quasi-linear convective systems and embedded supercells in the line and tornadoes embedded in those embedded supercells. I can't stand working that stuff, and that's pretty much all I get here.
Yeah, that's pretty hard. All right, James, can you tie all that back together into one thing now?
Yeah, kind of just going off what Jeff said too about sensible heat flux. It kind of it directly affects Earth's energy budget, the surface energy budget, and as a result, you'll get it just kind of snowballs and snowballs into other things. And it's not even necessarily been just moisture this year that's been the problem, or last year I should say. The timing of a lot of those troughs was off, was off by 6, 7, 8 hours, where if it had, stayed a little bit further west for a little bit longer, we might have had a shot at, daytime convection along the dry line. But then, the dry line started crashing east, moisture got horribly scoured during the day, and the trough, the forcing came in too late. And, as a result, it led to a lot of days there in mid to late April that just didn't pan out for a variety of reasons. Like, there was one day, April 26th, where I was on top of, we were in the Wichitas, and we were on top of Mount Scott, and the dew point was sitting at 63 or something like that. About 5 hours later, it was down to about 56-ish or so, and the bottom just fell out of the tub, and the dry line, crashed east. Nothing went up. The trough was still lagging way off to the west. And this year, these past couple of years, it's almost been like the perfect. It's just been kind of, everything has not fallen into place like you'd usually expect during late April and most of May. I mean, there have been really some great tornadoes and some great days during, Roswell, Bennington, Pilger, Stanton, all those days, which were great days on their own, but it's been just a kind of potpourri of things screwing with the entire season as a whole. It just comes down to we've been this. I think 2013, 2014 both got plagued by, polar intrusions going into, mid-April. I think it was mid-April 2013 where a cold front with a 40-degree gradient, came swinging through the southern plains on April 17th, and it was just like, this is something you'd expect to see at the start of March, end of February, and it's it's kind of like Jeff and Chris both said. It's kind of a cycle that feeds back into itself. You're not sure which is the result of which, whether it's just been, it's been synoptic features not panning out, moisture not panning out, your dry line, advancing too far east and then not retreating during the night, making it into horrible terrain, and it's just kind of it's made it really difficult, I guess, to chase solely if you can only chase the southern plains. It's been really difficult for you if you whiff on a few days.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. It's been pretty difficult for the last few years to actually get something. So, okay, so another question I'm going to throw in here, and whoever wants to answer it can answer it. Does a wet winter really affect the chase season coming into, March and April and parts of May, I guess? But by that time, there's not much snow. But, some of those late season snowstorms in late February, maybe early March, does that really affect a whole lot with the chase season coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you have a wet winter, then your soil moisture is going to be higher. And usually, the way soil moisture works is the deeper you go, the longer the memory of that is. So, if you get down, I don't know the exact specifics, but if you're down more than 50 centimeters to a meter or so, that's where your seasonal type of soil moisture starts to get stored. And if you have enough vegetation that can rip that moisture back out through evapotranspiration, or if you just have the kind of soil that will let that moisture get back to the surface, you will certainly see impacts in the following chase season, benefits rather, not just impacts, but benefits from the added soil moisture. You're going to get more evaporation, you're going to get higher surface dew points, and therefore you're going to get more cape, less intense capping. Well, it'll be easier for parcels to get past the cap. So, it will definitely benefit. As to exactly how much, it kind of depends on the season. It really does.
And another thing about that, I mean, if it's a late season precip event, that's going to make a difference. I mean, you think of the numbers and the stats, you can wind up with a wet winter overall, but if all that precip fell early in the season and it's had time to dry out, then, the impact of that precip is not going to be as great as if it fell at the end of the season. We haven't said this since we've been on air, so I'll go and throw it out. I'm a forecaster for the National Weather Service, and one of the biggest challenges that I face whenever I take calls from the public is trying to explain how some of the outlooks work from the Climate Prediction Center, like the 8 to 14 day outlooks, the 30-day outlooks. They'll go, well, you said it was going to be a colder than normal month, but we're sitting in the 80s right now, and it's the winter. It's like, well, but remember those 3 weeks where we were only having highs in the 20s? When you average out the numbers, in the end, it's going to wind up being below normal. So you kind of have to remember how statistics works that's kind of the one caveat in there when you're dealing with above normal, below normal, that kind of thing. You have to, is it spread out over the whole season? Does it all happen at once? Was it all early in the season, or was it all late in the season?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's taking the average, not exactly so much what's going on at the moment. So I guess probably the good thing that we noticed this year compared to the last few years is the drought removal, or at least for the most part, the severity of it has been removed. I'll show everyone at home what I'm talking about here on the drought monitor. A while back, this entire area, in southeast Colorado, Kansas, New Mexico, the Panhandles, Oklahoma, all were in the red, and of course Texas, and even parts down here where there's actually no drought. course, there's still some areas here in Southwest Oklahoma, Northwest Texas, we're having issues with getting the drought removed. But overall, I would say that's a good sign, though, that we're out of the drought. Like we just said, it's not a for sure thing that the season's going to be, a slam dunk and we're just going to get above average readings or whatever. No, it doesn't matter. But it does mean that there's a little extra positive, especially with the moisture, ground moisture, if we're not so much in the drought and we have plenty of green up. So that's just kind of tying it all together. But yeah, you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head in terms of, how important the drought really is for the chase season, I guess you could say, or just for spring in general for any precip. So cool. Does anyone have anything else we want to add to that subject?
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick, the definitely the email source region, northern Chihuahua, southern New Mexico has been looking a lot more favorable over the past few months, at least heading into the end of winter. Chihuahua picked up a little bit more rain, and hopefully, those really stout, dry emails that we were getting towards the start of the season last year won't be realized again. But at this point, it's who knows. Things can change rapidly, in 2 weeks. It's just kind of wishful thinking at this point.
Yeah, if I may cut in here, Marcus, if you can go to mine, I'll share these precip totals from the NWS site here over the last few months or whatever. Let's see here. Is that showing up now?
Yep.
Okay, so if you look down across southwest Texas, southern New Mexico, even southeast Arizona, there's definitely some positive precip anomalies. Right here we're looking at the last 60 days. I guess that darker green shade is 2 to 4 inches, which may not sound like much, but keep in mind that that's a pretty dry area. So, normal, they only get a handful of inches over the last 60 days on any given year. So that's great to see that they're getting that much more rain than they usually would at this time of year. That's going to drive those soil moisture values up. So, and that's long term, 60 days. That's 2 months worth of rain there. So that's a good sign.
Exactly. And Chris, you might want to, I don't know if you know enough about this, but if you want to talk about to people at home how important it really is to get, that area down there in West Texas and northern Mexico nice and saturated for a possibility of a good season up here.
Well, yeah, like we were talking about, there needs to be some soil moisture in place, because the days that it is borderline as far as low-level moisture goes, without that evapotranspiration out of the soil and out of the vegetation, that the dry line may mix farther east faster. Now, some of that can be overcome if you have the right synoptic conditions in place where you're getting a good fetch off the Gulf of moisture, and you may be bringing up 50, 60, 70 degree dew points on a really good day into that area. So that will probably overcome anything as far as a lack of soil moisture goes. But it's going to be on those days where it's borderline, or where drought conditions and the lack of rainfall will probably have the biggest role.
Yeah, that's why I always kind of keep my eye out there. Even these little pinched turds of little troughs that get pinched off the main area, the main troughs up in Alaska and over the East Coast, and they kind of make their way down here. Like I think we were watching one, James and I think everyone's kind of watching that one getting pinched off and getting shoved southwest. Those are rainmakers for that area. If they can just tap into some moisture, those usually get some good rains down there in northern Mexico. So I know I keep an eye on that, and some of the other South Plains guys too. So, actually, I know you've been kind of quiet over there. Does this make you want to maybe come out here more often now?
I mean, I'm always wanting to come out to the plains more often, but just going back to how you said that forecasting the correlation between the wet winter and an active storm season. While the more moisture is beneficial, you really can't forecast the upper level stuff ahead of time. So I guess that's just my biggest thing.
Yeah, and the upper level is probably the most important part out of all of it, and we just you kind of have to take that on, every 2 weeks basically is when you can put some sort of faith into the models to tell you what the upper levels are going to do. Um, but hopefully everyone kind of got something out of that in terms of drought conditions and how the rainfall in the early season really can affect the chase season coming up. So cool. Well, let's move on to another subject that I think James could probably take over this subject more. I think he knows a little bit more about it than I do in terms of what kind of setup they're trying to do here. And that is making the warning polygons a little bit different than what they used to be and what everyone's used to. So, James, kind of tell everyone what the issue is, and yeah.
So there was a presentation. I think it was just over a year ago now, at OU in the Weather Center, about changing how warnings are disseminated and how they're drawn up, basically, and moving away from the polygon and into a more, I guess, compacted version of a tornado warning. And the example that they used was plotting a series of circles in a kind of, depending on what the predicted path of the storm or the updraft was, and putting that out ahead and then filling it in to make a more precise warning, at least for tornadoes. And then also, at the same time, they also touched again on how they would upgrade impact-based warnings to coincide with this new type of warning box or warning shape, I guess you could say. And just kind of, they used more as an example of how they would do this, and the plots that they used, it looked like it's going to be a pretty good idea if they can actually get it off the ground, because it was going through testing at that time. They were talking to a group, I think, of sociologists on how these warnings would fare compared to the current polygons that are being used. And I think the biggest thing too is that they're just trying to find a way to better convey the danger and give people a more precise location of where this tornado is possibly going, whether or not they need to take shelter, and also using new radar tools to help create more precise warnings.
So, real quick, Chris, why don't you explain to the people this the whole thing with impact-based warnings? Because I think you mentioned before the show that you guys are just starting to learn about it. So, tell us what you know so far with it.
Yeah, this is basically something that came about as a result of the service assessment from the Joplin tornado. And basically what it is it's been, let's see, they first tested it in all the Weather Service offices that service Kansas. Then they expanded it last year to all of the central region of the Weather Service, plus a few offices in southern region. In southern region, I know Jackson is doing them. Tulsa, I believe, is doing them. And then I think this year, I've been told that I have to now get training on how to do them, so I think it may be expanding across the remainder of southern region this year, or maybe my office is now being included. I'm not sure which. I've done the training, so I'm ready to go whenever. But basically what it is the format of the warning has changed a little bit, but there's an emphasis placed on the exact impacts of the hazards. Specifically, more down at the very bottom of the warning, at the text of a warning. I'm not sure how to pull something up to show on here. Somebody else may be able to pull up like the last tornado warning from Wichita, or a severe thunderstorm warning or something, and I can point it out. But there are these little tags that we can add by the program that we use to issue warnings is called warning generator, and they're check marks or boxes that we click off on there, and it adds tags to the bottom. For hail, it would be the size of hail that we're expecting in a storm. It may say like 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch. For wind speed, it'll have 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, on and on and on. For tornadoes is probably the biggest one, and there are several different tags that can be used in there. One of them would be for kind of your, I hate to call it generic, but your generic radar indicated tornado warning. And then there's another tag for observed, when you actually have spotter confirmation of a tornado. And then there's another one that you can add in for considerable damage that's expected, and then one for catastrophic damage that's expected, which would really correspond with, really is being used at the same time as, say, a tornado emergency would be. And the considerable damage tag is supposed to be used in the cases where damage is expected to be EF2 or greater. And there was a study done, and I can't for the life of me remember who did it, but it was a study done in 2012, and it was a box and whisker plot that shows low-level rotation speeds that we can get off the velocity displays in AWIPS in the weather service offices, and it basically gives kind of probabilities of where, of what EF rating, if a tornado is ongoing, what it might be. So that way we can kind of have a better idea on whether or not to, upgrade to using a considerable damage tag, for instance, versus not using the considerable damage tag. But kind of the big thing is the emergency managers and can key off those tags to better position their resources should there need to be any rescue and recovery efforts afterward. And even some of the software like GR Analyst in the latest versions of GR3 key off these tags a little bit. There's an option in there where if the tornado is observed, if that observed tag is being used, it will change the color of the warning polygon. Same thing if a tornado emergency is issued, it will change the color of the tornado polygon. Part of this was come about because one of the big findings they got out of the Joplin Surface Assessment was that most people don't take immediate action after hearing about a tornado warning. They tend to seek another source of confirmation before doing anything, whether it's turning on the TV, looking on the internet, looking on Facebook, whatever. But if there's something that says, tornado observed, considerable damage is expected, it's supposed to be something to try to spur people into action faster. Because, in a lot of these situations, seconds count.
Yeah, and to me that makes sense to me. All that makes sense to me. But I think for a lot of people, a lot of the general public, it's going to be hard for them to get used to because they're just used to the old classic, red for tornado warning, yellow for severe thunderstorm, and green for flash flood. And that's kind of what they went off of. If you were somewhere in that tornado warning, it was just time to take shelter, which, that was, not too long ago, obviously, but, I think it's long enough to where, it might be, it's time for something different. And yeah, Ashley, I'll go ahead and get your opinion on this because this is something that I think maybe a lot of people out in your area kind of do, and that's, they're those type of people that may not take the warning seriously. I'm not trying to stereotype a type of people, but
you're completely right. People are really too complacent when it comes to tornado warnings, and
they think that because you live in this area, they're not going to get a tornado or whatever, or they have to see it. They have to see it in the sky before they're going to actually take shelter.
Right.
And we all know that's a bad thing. So, do you think that the public is going to grasp this new way of warning, or is it going to be something that they're just not going to take seriously because it's something that's changing?
I can see it going either way. I would like to see it that people actually pay more attention to it. Just wishful thinking. I think if they see it firsthand, like, oh, okay, well, maybe we should actually get to shelter and not go outside with our iPhones and smartphones. Oh,
Yeah,
but
that seems to be the running theme now. Is
that's
I guess
tornado warning. Let's go outside.
yeah, I've noticed that a lot of recent tornadoes have all been filmed, with people's cell phones because they don't care. They'll go out there, and I think some of the craziest footage is from Tuscaloosa, where that guy was just sitting outside of his apartment, and that tornado literally was right across the parking lot from him.
That's great
And
video.
it's
It's
awesome
actually a
video.
great video of what the airflow looks like around a strong tornado, actually.
It's true, but I mean it's insane that he
It
just
is.
doesn't care to take
I don't know how
photos.
that building is still standing at the end of that video. But actually, that's a great example of, I think part of the problem is people are seeing these videos on YouTube of people that are doing really stupid stuff, getting way too close to tornadoes, whether they're strong or weak, and living. Not only are they living, but they're not even getting hurt. The video survives, the videographer appears to be uninjured, so they see that and they go, oh, well, I can do that too. Let
I
me
can do
stand
that.
right in front of an approaching tornado. And so, I mean, it doesn't help when you have all these videos of people getting away with it, essentially.
Exactly.
I think the utility of impact-based warnings is going to be far more useful to the not the general public, probably more to the emergency managers and then like the media folks. I think where any impact to the public with these impact-based warnings is going to be how the media and how third parties present it to the public, because the vast majority of the public do not consume their warning information directly from the National Weather Service. They get it from TV far and away. Now, I mean, I guess you could say in a way people are getting them on their cell phones with the new, the text messages that are going out now. But still, most people are getting that information from the media. So it's going to be how do the TV folks and how do the media folks kind of, I guess, portray that information and disseminate it out to the public.
Yeah, you kind of have to go back to that old saying of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You could throw all these different changes out, and and even the TV, Mets and the TV stations, they can, break into the cover or break into the TV schedule to actually show some coverage and stuff, which a lot of TV stations, down south and major metropolitan areas do. They'll break in and tell you about it, but some of those people just don't choose to take it seriously, or they just think that, hey, if I get this crazy 15 seconds of film on my camera phone, then I could give it to CNN, and everyone's on CNN's gonna see it, and I'm gonna be famous in town, and blah blah blah. So
a lot of it's going to be an education effort. We're just going to have to continue to try to educate the public on what these things mean. I mean, I still run into people, even in Oklahoma, when I go back home and visit my family, that don't know the difference between a watch and a warning. I mean, they think a watch means watch out, it's here, which is, not correct. So
I would think
I
someone work.
was going to say something about that too.
I was gonna say I would think someone that works for the Weather Service said, tell his family by now how the heck it works out.
Well, no, I'm not saying my family knows that. My family knows how it works.
Okay.
I mean, they're calling me when I'm at work asking about stuff. I'm going, like, oh, there's something going on up there. I don't know. I'm worried about what's happening down here. I'm, working radar today. No, my family knows. I mean, they have a meteorologist in their family. By God, they better know. It's other people I'll hear these comments from, or, I'll read them on Facebook pages or something like that. They'll say, oh, I thought or comments on news articles, which reading comments on news articles is always a dangerous undertaking. But I'll see people say, oh, I thought a watch meant watch out, it's here. And a warning was just, oh, it could be here. They get the terminology backwards, so.
Yeah, Ashley, what were you going to say?
I mean, Chris hit it on the head. That's exactly what I was going to say. Just the lack of education. I definitely think there should be more more programs to educate the public on the difference between watch warnings. I know the National Weather Service is putting on a severe weather workshop that's open to the general public later this month. So I'm not sure what other National Weather Service offices are doing anything like that. But I think that'll definitely help.
I know, of course, Norman. Yeah, Norman does their yearly thing, and Dallas has something too. The DFW area.
Go to spotter training. That's
spotter training.
As
good
as anything.
Yeah, spotter training will definitely tell you the difference between a watch and a warning. And I'm sure now, and maybe Chris can mention this, I'm sure now that we got these new different warning systems, that's going to also be implemented into the spotter training and the Skywarn training classes.
Somewhat. Like I said, since we haven't started using impact-based warnings yet at my office, in fact, we've been told we're going to it, but I haven't heard of a exact date that we're implementing it yet. I have a feeling it's probably going to be sometime in April, but I could be completely wrong about that. It may be in March for all I know. I was just told, get trained on this and do it now, so I did. Yeah, once we go to that, that will definitely be, be something I put into our spotter trainings. I mean, that's one of the things I do at my office is I'm really involved with our storm spotter training program. And I mean, I have 2 slides in there, one that tells what a watch is, one that tells what a warning is, who issues which product. The watch is issued by the Storm Prediction Center, warnings are by the local offices. And I have, I also have an example in there when I talk about the value of storm spotters. A generic warning statement with radar indicated tornado, but then if you add the, spotter confirmed a tornado on the ground or damage has been confirmed, I always ask people, I say, which one of these statements do you like better? Which one gives you more information? And, they always point to the one that has that confirmation statement in there. So yeah, it'll be an education effort, and it always is. It's an ongoing battle, one that will never end.
Yeah, I think that'll forever be an issue, is trying to get the perfect warning that really grabs people's attention and lets them take the proper action, Now, on a side subject, I know we were talking about how the TV Mets do and how they portray the warnings and whatnot. And I'm going to bring up a subject that's maybe a little bit sore to some people, but I think people need to – I want to hear some people's opinions on this. I did not chase May 31st, 2013. I was stuck at work. I had to stay for the end of the month shift, and so I couldn't go out. But I knew exactly was looking, and I was definitely watching it carefully. And when I got home from work, I flipped on my computer and I tuned into KFOR online. And the first thing I hear after that tornado's been on the ground for a while is old Mike Morgan just telling everybody, you're going to die unless you drive south. And that was by far the dumbest thing I ever heard. I had my mouth open with doing this whole thing, watching this, and I was like, I can't believe he just said that. And he kept repeating it over and over again. And that definitely had a negative effect. And I think everyone that chased that day they probably didn't know that's what happened. They probably figured, wow, there's just a mass exodus leaving, Reno and Oklahoma City. But I'm sure at the time, people that were chasing that day did not realize that is what happened. It is one of the biggest TV stations in the city just made the dumbest move ever, with calling that out. So, I don't know if you guys want to touch on that at all, if it's something that you're just, not interested in taking on. But I think everyone can agree that was exactly the wrong thing to do when it came to warning people about a tornado, and that's telling them to get out of the city.
Yeah, I have an interesting story to go along with that, actually, since I lived in Norman. I did not chase that day either. I was actually planning on going to see a friend's wedding in Ohio that weekend, and me and my wife were going to leave town that day. We ended up not leaving because, frankly, I was so worried about what was going to happen that I didn't want to leave my pets behind and have the worst thing happen, and we're not even there to have to deal with it. So we ended up not going. I I volunteered at the hazardous weather test bed that day. They do their spring forecasting experiment every year, and that was one of the later weeks that they did. And so I was there, the early part of the day watching, looking at all the models and the conditions, and that, that was one of the most nervous or even scared that I've been for weather in a long time, actually. When I was growing up, I was actually pretty scared of thunderstorms, terrified of tornadoes, all that stuff. I got over it. But when this day came up, having followed, May 20th by 10 days, I was pretty nervous about what might happen. And so I kind of started to think in my mind, would I, should I think about evacuating? Should I think about leaving if it got really bad? And when I got home at like 4 o'clock, just before things started to blow up, I put a few things in my car. I loaded some of my more important things in my car just in case, the worst was going to happen and I had time to go. But as the day evolved, and I started, every hour or so, I started walking out towards the street that I live on, which is a main drag in Norman. And I kept noticing traffic getting worse and worse and worse. And this was, I think, before Mike Morgan said anything about getting out of town. I think there were other people also saying, we got to think about evacuating or whatever. I think Moore just had everybody scared. May 20th, just everybody around there was on edge, and this did not help. And so as time kept going and as the storm closed in on Norman, as traffic got worse, I just said, there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to get anywhere if I even wanted to leave. And so well before the storm even hit, I said right there, I'm not evacuating. I'm not going anywhere because this traffic is horrible. There's no way to get anywhere. And I'd rather, if we got hit by a big tornado, I'd certainly rather take it in my townhome here than try to, outrace it on the road when there's nowhere to go. I mean, the roads can only handle so many cars. And when they get saturated like they did that day, there's big problems. And I don't think a lot of people were really aware that that kind of thing could happen before. I mean, maybe one of you guys can correct me if I'm wrong about the history on this, but I don't think there's ever been a case of a big-time storm or tornado threatening a large metropolitan area and somebody that people know and trust, like Mike Morgan, telling everybody, get out of there, trying to tell hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate a large area. I don't think that's ever happened before. So I don't think anybody really knew what to expect. And so now that it's happened, we're kind of like, oh, yeah, that was probably a dumb idea. Although beforehand, people might have been like, well, only so many people will try to evacuate. But now we know better. Now we have an idea of how many people are actually going to try to get in their cars and vacate an area, a large populated area, in front of a tornado. So it was kind of eye-opening. It really was.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. More did just happen, and that day was being brought up as this is going to be a carbon copy of More. The setup looks exactly the same. Everything's there to make this a big day. And I know that some people, I think there was a discussion in Storm Track. Of course, there's a lot of discussion about this day, Storm Track. And I remember some people saying, well, on a day like that, where that something big's going to happen and really close to the, OKC Metro, would you just, like sometime in the morning or mid-afternoon or at noon, I guess, would you just pack things up and just go far enough west to get across the dry line and just stop and let things happen? I mean, is that a viable way of I guess preparing for a day? And in my opinion, it actually is, if you think about it. If you know what's going to happen, if you know that you're behind the dry line, I think that's actually a very fair way to keep safe. Now, for like you folks, Ashley, you folks down there that don't have that dry line to step back on, you're at the mercy of what the storm's going to do, before you can make a judgment call like that to actually evacuate a large city.
Right. Plus, you don't see it coming because of the terrain.
Yeah, that too. That's another thing. So,
I mean, it's funny that you bring up, driving west of the dry line or evacuating hours before, because that's the point I was going to bring up. When I worked in Amarillo, I used to remember getting a call from someone that she was deathly afraid of storms, and she would ask, where the dry line was on it, because she wanted to drive to get out of the risk area. And I remember her getting so mad at me one time because she asked me how far west she was going to have to drive, and I said Albuquerque. And then she asked me how far south, and I said El Paso. And she got really mad at me. I was like, no, seriously, the slight risk is that big. That's the area under the gun today. I'm not, trying to smart off or anything. But I mean, even when I was growing up, I mean, in me and my parents, we used to we started going to my aunt and uncle's house because they had just built a new house and had a basement, and we went there and had a storm party. And this was really, it started off as a joke at first, and we went to help my grandmother. She had a storm shelter, but she had had knee surgery and couldn't get down there to her shelter on her own, so she went down the street to their house, and we went down there too. And the first time we ever did that was May 3rd in 1999. And we actually had a tornado come up to the Tulsa area that day, or that night, about 2 or 3 miles from us. So we actually, that's the one and only time we actually went down to their basement. And even now, I tell my parents, I see, you know, like Moore, the day of the Moore tornado, and you know, a couple weeks earlier with the Shawnee tornado, I told them, I said, hey, this is you know, moving straight up the turnpike towards Tulsa. I said, you guys have about 2 hours. You know, go to my aunt and uncle's house. I mean, I'm serious. Go there, because it's, you know, if it lasts, it's moving straight up for you guys. You guys have plenty of time. If you don't feel like, and I actually did a presentation on the El Reno tornado for our local AMS chapter down here in Shreveport, because that was the last time I chased, was El Reno. I was actually home on vacation visiting my family, and it just happened to come up that there were 3 consecutive days in there, the 29th, 30th, and 31st, I believe, that I was able to chase, and I hadn't chased since I left Amarillo. So I said, okay, I'm going. And El Reno was the last time I went. But I did a presentation kind of on my experience with that and the traffic jams and everything. Yeah, after I went back and looked at my GPS log later, I found out that I was on Highway 81 2 to 3 minutes before the tornado crossed the highway when it was at its widest point. I didn't realize that it was, you know, I had cut it quite that close. Of course, I couldn't really see much of anything at that point. I was riding with someone and had my head buried in a map trying to plan a route for us. I didn't get worried about, you know, if something might happen to us until we hit the backlog of traffic trying to get through the 4-way stop at Union City. But I've been asked about, you know, evacuating areas before a tornado since then, when I did that presentation here in Shreveport, and I said, you know, there's no reason why you can't leave and go somewhere else if you don't feel like your home is a safe place during a tornado. If you live in a mobile home, maybe an older home that's, you know, not really well constructed, sure, go visit a relative that has a basement or a, you know, storm shelter of some kind. But if you're going to do it, you need to do it hours in advance. If you wait until the tornado warning is issued or the storm has developed, you've waited too long. In fact, I would venture to say that if you wait to leave until the tornado watch is issued, you have waited too long. This has got to be something that you do hours ahead of time, because, I mean, you look at what that traffic was like, and of course part of it too at that time in Oklahoma City was rush hours, so you had people that were just leaving to go home anyway from work. But, you know, look at how long it takes to evacuate a city, you know, when they turn the highways into contraflow for, you know, hurricanes coming in. And that was essentially what was happening that day in El Reno, is you had a lot of people clogging the highway in one direction trying to get out of the area. So like I said, it's something that needs to be done. If you're going to leave, go somewhere else to kind of be there for the day of the storm. It should be done before any watches are issued, the storms actually develop, or anything like that. It's not necessarily a bad idea, but it's in the timing and when you make that decision to go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to wait too long, and it's funny because I was thinking about it, and May 28th of that year, of course, everyone remembers, that was Bennington. That was a big day, great day up in Kansas. Well, that was a pretty big supercell, and actually a tornado warning supercell coming in Amarillo that night. And I remember chasing that storm from 4 p.m. in the afternoon all the way through midnight when it actually came into town. And that was about 3 miles, no, probably more than that. I was right between Amarillo and Canyon when that storm started approaching the west side of town. And I remember looking on the interstate, and there was just a big. It wasn't congested, but it was just a very busy traffic flow south. And I'm thinking to myself, surely our local Mets didn't just pull a Morgan, and tell everyone to drive south. I think everyone kind of does that on their own. But I think that's kind of just a default thing to do for some people when they don't have basements or they don't feel safe in their homes is to just drive away. And the problem is sometimes that doesn't work. Another thing I remember from that day and more, or not more, I'm sorry, May 31st was, and you probably know this, Jeff, I-35 was under construction there in Norman, was it? Or in Moore, southbound especially, I believe.
Yeah, they've been doing construction on I-35 in Norman. Well, they actually have kind of started to finish it up now finally, but when that was happening, yeah, there was construction there, so they kind of a bottleneck going on the Canadian River Bridge on the south side of Norman there, which definitely did not help things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, James. I was just to say if you had anything for it.
I was just going to say, piggybacking off what Jeff just said, yeah, that area, once you get south of Highway 9, you don't really have that many options between there and about Goldsby, down closer to Riverwind Casino, and it definitely creates issues with situations like that.
That was another one of the problems on May 31st. Mike Morgan said drive south, but he didn't say how far or where to go. So people got on the highway and they just started driving south. But then after a while, they were like, okay, now what? Do I just pull off the highway and sit here? Do I go down to Dallas? Do I go down to the Red River? And what you had is part of the road clogging was caused by people just stopping arbitrarily, 7, 8, 9, 10, 50 miles south of the storm. And that clogged up the roads because nobody told them where to go. Just go. So that's kind of a problem too, is if you're going to tell people to evacuate, fine, but make them have a destination. Don't just say go somewhere. Say go to this specific city, go to this specific intersection. Go spend your money in the casino, and there's casinos all over the place. I'm sure they're tornado proof or whatever, so have some fun. It'll be great for the economy of Oklahoma if that ever happens.
Yeah. Test your luck even more so. Just go to the casino.
Yeah, really, I'm kidding.
Tornado roulette.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is when it comes to the warning language and everything, it needs to be a unified message between the Weather Service and the media and everybody that disseminates and gets the message out to the public, because the media folks depend on the Weather Service to issue the warnings, and the Weather Service depends on the media folks to disseminate that and get the message out to the public.
Yeah, and I believe it was just brought up in chat. This wasn't the first time Mike Morgan did this. Apparently, he did it also on May 20th of that year. But I just remember, and it's just, I just don't understand what goes through your guys' mind when he says, I remember exactly what he said on May 31st, and that was, if you're above ground, you're going to die. That was plain and simple. That's exactly what he said.
And that's wrong, too. Sorry to interrupt.
If you want to survive, no, that's fine. And if you want to survive, you have to drive south. And, the funny thing is that storm was a southeast moving storm. So, at least I guess towards the end of the life cycle of that storm, it was a southeast moving storm. So that really wasn't even the best direction to drive. And, I believe we said this last week when Skip was talking about, I think we're talking briefly on escape routes. Sometimes the best escape route is actually to drive north through the rain and stuff.
First core punch that bitch.
Yeah, this core puncher, who cares? You can claim it on hail. No. But yeah, I just remember he said that pair of sentences, if you're above ground, you're going to die, is just.
The thing
ridiculous.
is, there's instances of both that piece of advice and, evacuating to get out of the way that have lingered in the culture of the area ever since May 3rd of '99.
Yep.
Because it was highly publicized. There were other meteorologists too, several actually, that said, you really need to be underground for this tornado. There were, other interviews and reports of people saying, yeah, I left because I didn't think I would survive if I stayed in my house, and it's a good thing because I came back and all that's left is the slab. And it kind of I kind of equate it to the bridge in Kansas from 1991. You know, and how that kind of started the overpasses are a safe place myth. So I mean, there's always going to be tales of survival that are kind of contrary to the weather people's common knowledge of what should be done and what not. But the public that don't really understand the ins and outs of these things, they hear, well, they did this and they survived, so that's what I should do.
Yeah.
Which kind of comes back to our point of, you know, the whole people going outside to film tornadoes, you know, 50 yards away from them. You know, they just it's a kind of a copycat mentality where, hey, well, if he can do it, I can do it. You know, if they can survive under the bridge, I can survive under the bridge. You know.
Here's a statistic as well that I'm not sure everybody watching knows it, but you can survive an EF5 tornado in a single family home. Keep in mind that of some statistics here, in the Moore tornado, near the location of the Moore Medical Center on Telephone Road, I think there were 4 or 5 houses just like a block away that sustained EF5 damage. People were in those houses and there were no fatalities. You can survive those tornadoes. Yeah, you might be a little bit less likely than if you got hit by, you know, an EF2 or went through got sideswiped by an EF5, but you can survive, and it's not that hard. So, you know, a house actually offers quite a bit of protection, more than I think some people expect, and more than I think some of these meteorologists who have said, get underground or you'll die, are giving credit for them.
Yeah, that's very true. And especially if your house is well built, you know, there's not a whole lot that's it's gonna really wipe it clean. I mean, you know, if that EFI just sat over your house for a while, which, you know, that would eventually just grind away at the ground. You know, there's definitely some horror cases out there of bad run-ins with people, you know, getting pulled out of their storm shelters. I remember Jarrell, Texas in '97. There was some horrible stories out there of, you know, that happening, but definitely it's a case-by-case thing. But in general, you know, you can survive. You can just stay at home and protect yourself and your family safely in a small home, as Jeff said. So, I mean, yeah, I think we've kind of covered it all. You know, I didn't mean to kind of jump on Mike Morgan, that subject and all, but I think that definitely ties into what we're talking about in terms of properly warning people and making sure that they understand the severity of the situation, and hopefully they know and they're educated enough to know what the proper way is to stay safe in that situation. So, does anyone else have anything on that subject before we change it? I suppose no. Very well put, people. That was a very good way to put everything, and I think we did really well on that. So hopefully some people did learn a few things on that. So.
And there are ways to get educated.
No, definitely. The education's out there. I think, you know, not just for chasers or anything, but for the general public, there's definitely a lot of education on how to properly stay safe. So definitely look into that. All right. So let's go ahead and change the gears. Let's go from a bit of a somber subject to a bit of a funnier subject, I guess. I guess a lighter subject, you could say. Let's talk about days that have been the biggest surprise from us. This can include anything from just something surprising that happened while you were chasing, or just the forecast and it looked so good and turned out to be amazing. Just like me and James talked about Tempo yesterday. Son of a bitch. Missed that day.
Still salty.
Oh man, it is. It still burns. It still burns a little bit. So yeah, let's kind of dive into it. Ashley, I know you said you had a couple of stories of some of your best days, I guess. And you have a great story to tell us about a turkey. So let's go ahead and let you start off.
We were chasing out in Kansas on 4/14/12, and we were on some road. We were driving behind Ben Holcomb, and out of nowhere we just see bunch of pieces of what I thought was a tire. Well, it turns out a turkey had wandered right in front of his truck, and we were going 70 or so miles an hour down this road. And all you see are just feathers and pieces of this turkey while we're trying to catch up to this tornado-warned storm. Pull over, and all you see are just entrails and guts on the front of his truck.
Did it?
So that was kind of a... There was no damage on the truck. No damage.
That's because, isn't that because he was driving a Ford? And that's why. It was Ford tough.
Yeah. built Ford tough.
Yeah.
But, I'll say my worst surprise will probably be the Good Friday tornado in Murfreesboro. I absolutely hate this day. I went with a coworker of mine. He also had a meteorology degree and had been chasing for a few years. So the tornado warning gets issued for the west side of Murfreesboro. Well, we leave work, start heading out, look at the radar. Don't know why they issued the tornado warning. Whatever. We see a storm further south. Okay, we drive 45 miles south. Well, we planned some hail there. I get a phone call. They're like, "Oh my gosh, Ashley, are you okay?" Yeah, why? There's a tornado in Murfreesboro. I'll be damned, there's an EF4 tornado going through Murfreesboro as we were leaving town.
Yep. That's always painful to hear stuff like that, so.
So that's why I always forever hate Good Friday. EF4.
Hey, I'm always going to hate Memorial Day just because of May 31st of 2010. As I said last night, I definitely had the time to get there. I just didn't think this storm out here in Colorado is going to do anything, and it stayed tornado warned for like 2 or 3 hours, I'm sure. So,
Marcus, hold on. Can I just stop for a sec? Are you saying you hate America?
Oh, come on.
Because if you hate Memorial Day,
don't
hate
put
America.
words in my mouth, James. Come on.
If you hate Memorial Day, the terrorists win.
Oh, man, yep. Well, that's why I have the day off. Thank you, America, for letting me have the day off. So, anyway, you know what, James? You go next. Your best surprise day. Fine.
Yeah. So kind of related to the turkey story, except thankfully what we hit wasn't live. It was me, Brady, I think John Stone, and somebody else, and we packed into Brady's tiny little Chevy Sonic, and we headed out to the Panhandle. It was like an early February day in 2013, and of course storms didn't go up during the daytime. There was a big dust storm going on behind the dry line in the Panhandle that day, and so it started out, Brady's car got hailed on, which, that's bad all around. You're in a tiny little Sonic, you got golf balls and tennis balls hitting the top of it, this little Sonic, and we got out, he's got, pretty decent-sized dents on the top. Well, then as we're trying to drive out of the hail, we hit a tumbleweed going about 40, and this tumbleweed, it's a child-sized tumbleweed, like it wasn't toddler, it was a full-grown child tumbleweed, and we hit that thing going full speed. Brady goes, "Oh shit!" as we're driving into it. We're dragging the shit out of this thing along, and finally we get back into Norman, and Brady, I think to this day, is still pulling out tumbleweeds, but it literally came out of nowhere. We didn't see another tumbleweed anywhere, and all of a sudden it's just like a 4-foot by 4-foot tumbleweed comes flying out in front of the car. And then funnily enough, later that same week, Brady's car got hailed on again after a hailstorm moved through Norman. It messed up like the Del Rancho up on Lindsay, just put massive holes in, and the entire right side of Brady's car got peppered with hailstones. So there was that whole little incident, and then kind of the best surprise for me was, honestly, I think it was October 12th, 2012, in the Texas Panhandle was probably the best surprise day I've ever had, where there were actual, it was the day before a big, I think it was a moderate risk in Oklahoma the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course it didn't pan out. Storms are absolute grungy garbage, no tornadoes anywhere in Oklahoma. And that little supercell initiated north of Lubbock split once, ingested another shower to its south, and then started, spinning like a top east of Hale Center and west of Floydada. And I mean, they were little wimpy bird fart tornadoes, and I guarantee if it hadn't have rained earlier through that area, there might have been nice big dusty tornadoes, but nevertheless managed to get 3 tornadoes in the off season. They were first Texas tornadoes, and on a day that when we drove into Amarillo, I mean, the warm front was still sagging south of Canyon at that point, and the first towers didn't go up until well after 6 o'clock, and ended up being a really good day.
Yeah, I remember chasing that day. Luckily, I didn't have a lot to risk because I lived pretty close, but yeah, I remember that. We were there was a whole group of people there in Dimmitt, Texas.
Yep, we stopped at Dimmitt.
For some reason, that town's population doubled in like 20 minutes. Yeah, I remember everyone was about to call it a day. I mean, you had guys like Scott Bennett and Mike Brady, guys that are from like a full day's drive away down there, and they were about to head home. And luckily, that storm did pop, near Lubbock, and just kept strengthening. And yeah.
The worst thing about that day too is there was that rogue supercell down by Carlsbad, New Mexico, that was just sitting there taunting everybody because it was just far enough to where you couldn't get to it before sunset. But it was just sitting there. It was barely moving. And then the upper level dynamics kicked in closer to sunset out in the Panhandle, and it was just like boom.
Yeah, that's one thing you learn from being a Panhandle chaser is that New Mexico loves to taunt you all the time. There's those big days where it's like 3 o'clock and there's this monster supercell out there by Roswell, and it's like, ooh, I bet that's a good looking storm, but you just can't do it. So,
yep.
That hail and tumbleweed story, that was Brady Kendrick, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty classic Yellow Shoes fail. I'm sure he's happy for my shout out there.
Oh yeah. So let's jump to you, Chris. Let's hear your best surprise day.
Well, kind of my funny story is another tumbleweed story. The first day I ever chased was my freshman year at OU. Was April 6th of 2001, a big high-risk day that wound up being not really a tornado day, but a huge straight-line wind event day. And one of my chase partners that day was Aaron Kennedy. He was one of my roommates at the time. And he's from northern Illinois, had never really been out on the high plains before. I'd been all over Oklahoma since I'd grown up there and had family everywhere. And we were out by Arnett waiting on this squall line to overtake us, and some big tumbleweed blows past the front of my car, and Aaron just got so excited, and he just screamed out, "Holy crap, it's a tumbleweed!" and a piece of something else. And he just kind of faded off into nothingness. And it was so hilarious. I was like, "You're getting that worked up over a tumbleweed?" And then later on, we were kind of Leroy Jenkinsing the squall line, and I didn't really know how bad it was behind us, and that apparently there was kind of a funnel behind us, and I'm flying down the road in an '89 Chevy Cavalier, and I start, getting hungry, so I'm like, "Hey, where are the Fritos?" We had this bag of Fritos in the car somewhere. Don't know where it was. We could smell it. I think it got kicked under the seat somewhere. And so, they're all going, "Why are you worried about Fritos with what's going on?" I was like, "Because I'm hungry. Food must come first." So that kind of turned into a infamous line for a few years. But probably the best surprise day I had was May 29th of 2004 in Harper County, Kansas. That was the first tornado I ever saw out chasing, and saw, I think, 10 different tornadoes from one storm that day. There were multiple instances where there were 2 tornadoes on the ground at one time, where you had not a satellite tornado, but a completely separate wall cloud forming several miles away from another tornado. It was really interesting. The storm moved at like 25 miles an hour. You could just drive circles around it. Did not expect to have a day anywhere like that. By far the best day I ever had chasing. And then probably the other interesting surprise day was, it was funny, somebody brought up the slow year of 2009, but it was April 29th. Kind of see a theme with my chasing. Everything's around the 29th of a month. April 29th of 2009, out in the Texas Panhandle. There was a bunch of storms that had developed between Amarillo and Lubbock, and they were kind of training eastward, kind of between Interstate 27 and Childress. And everybody and their dog was down there chasing those storms. And nothing was really happening up in the northern Texas Panhandle at all. And so I got off work, and I was headed around Amarillo running some errands, and all of a sudden a storm blew up just north of Amarillo. And so I went back home and got my stuff and jumped out and started chasing it, and followed it for about the next 2 or 3 hours, between Borger and down to Panhandle and to Groom, and kind of got the whole life cycle of it. And it produced 2 really weak tornadoes, one really weak tornado just north of Panhandle. Well, maybe it was 2, I can't remember, but you could see both funnels at the same time. One as it was, the old one as it was occluding, and then the second one as it was forming and then touched down kind of at the same time. The storm itself wasn't anything particularly spectacular. It looked great on radar. It wasn't the most photogenic storm I've ever seen, but what was surprising about it, and keep in mind this was 2009, I didn't see another car around that storm the entire time I was out there. Of course, everybody was down there chasing the storms down to the south that had been ongoing for 2 or 3 hours by that point. But there wasn't a single person on that storm in the northern Panhandle. And I remember looking back over the storm track logs later, and I remember somebody commenting, because I had my spotter network icon running, and people were commenting, just go, how is he the only person up there? This isn't fair. He's got this whole storm to himself. So that was probably the biggest surprise, because I was out there and going, where is everyone? There's no one else here but me. Something is wrong.
Guys.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's a big win right there.
Well, sorry to burst your bubble, Chris, but I was also on that storm.
Lies.
Picture didn't happen.
Well, hold on a sec, because here's the thing. You said it wasn't very photogenic, and I didn't have very good camera equipment back in 2009, but I did have some. And this was, I believe, just north of Conway, so you have to forgive the small picture. I'll zoom in on it, but that's what that storm looked like from Conway. Very high precip looking storm. Kind of that scrubbing bubbles look. But yeah, I remember that storm. Actually, I actually had to jump up and get into Panhandle, and this was, I think I got off of work just very quickly, and but yeah, I remember that day because I drove up there, we got into the storm, and this was kind of my first year of road chasing, so I was a little skittish about hail, and so once that course started getting closer, we bailed on it and we drove south, and that's where we stopped. We stopped just north of Conway, and that's that structure we shot. So, you said that you were the only dude chasing on that storm. Well, hold on a sec, because actually I was there too. So, but we did not see the tornadoes at all. So you did get to see the tornadoes all yourself, because we were, by that point when it started dropping tornadoes, we were already down by Conway, and just looking at it from a wide angle view. So,
I take it back. I did get a couple pictures of that good photogenic shelf cloud when I was north of Groom, but I mean, until that point, I didn't get a lot of good structure out of it. I'm more of a wide-angle structure shot kind of chaser than I am the close-up stuff.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Jeff, what do you have for us on the best surprise day?
I'm going to have to go with April 9th, 2011. I'm sure many of you remember that was a sort of a big day in Iowa. Not only that, but it was a big day early in the season in Iowa, although it really kind of started in Nebraska. The surprise for me that day was I thought my day was done right when it actually was beginning. I was out sitting around Council Bluffs for most of the afternoon, We saw the Q field form just across the river in eastern Nebraska. We chased the Q field, which gave birth to our storm of the day. So we were on it in Nebraska. We followed it back into Iowa, and that's the storm that went on to produce the Mapleton EF3. Somehow we managed to miss that, even though we were right under the base for several minutes. At one point we started getting hailed on, and we were in my friend's new car. He didn't want to get hailed in, so he made us basically haul ass east of the storm. We probably ended up 12 to 15 miles east of the tornado when it was going through Mapleton. So we were sitting in just a dusty field in the Les Hills of Iowa when that tornado was going on, and all we could see was just kind of a dark blue wall. We never knew there was a tornado going on there. But we heard about it, we saw the spotter net reports. We're like, God damn it, we missed that, all that crap. And well, we just, we had nothing else to do, so we just stayed with the storm, and it started to get dark, and we figured, well, that's probably, that's it, that's the day. We missed the show of the day. And so we were just, out in the country, and we pulled off on some farm road turnoff, and we caught up to Skip Talbot. He was there with, I think, Mike, I can't even remember his last name now.
Brady?
Was that
Mike Brady?
No, a guy who moved from Illinois. Mike Boyk. He was there with Mike Boyk and somebody else, and we just started chatting, and they were like, we saw the tornado. It was awesome. I was like, yeah, we didn't see it. Well, little did we know that while we were letting that storm go to our north, it was developing another tornado. And eventually, I kind of turned over and looked, and it was way off in the distance, but there was plenty of lightning. I said, wait a minute, is that a tornado? And we looked, and it was like, holy crap, it's a tornado! And so we, I had already put all my equipment was basically packed at that point. I was ready to pack it in and go home, and I was like, ah, crap. Got my tripod back out, got my camera back out, started getting long exposures, started getting all these shots of a tornado, 5 miles away or so. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And we decided to get back on the storm, start chasing it again, and I'm sure everybody knows what happened after that. The storm just went crazy for a few hours after dark. It was spitting out tornadoes left and right. So I thought at that point, we were going to see nothing. We ended up seeing several tornadoes on a pretty well-structured supercell after dark. And since I had my camera with me that can do the long exposures, I ended up getting some pretty good structure shots along with some of the tornadoes. So I definitely was not expecting to luck out in early April on a warm front in Iowa with just a lone storm like that. That was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, that was a pretty memorable day. And man, that's always a bummer when you got someone that you're not in your car and you can't do what you want. That restriction I can't do it anymore. So, all right. So my big surprise day, we're gonna jump back into the 2010 season because that was probably the best year for me. This was the first day. Let me see if I can get this going real quick. This was the first day of 3 days I had in late May, well, somewhat late May, the 23rd, 24th, the 25th in the Panhandle. To this day, this stretch of 3 days is probably my best in terms of tornado count and tornado quality. Well, I'll show you what we had here. The day. Okay, well, let me first do this because this is what makes this a great day. May 23rd, 2010. This is what I woke up to and saw the convective outlook. C-Tex down here in the Panhandle, slight risk up north, a little 5% there in northwest Kansas, but I couldn't make it because I had to work that day. And so I was like, well, if anything pops locally, we'll jump on it. And then, let's go to 1630, and the slight risk is extended down through the Panhandle, but there's still just 2% tornado, 5% up here. And again, I'm just like, all right, well, if anything goes, we'll do it. Well, actually, I think I don't remember what time we left. I think I worked half a day. I left with Brady Kendrick and a friend of mine, Jake Hudson. We decided, well, let's just go north because this area looks pretty much the best area out of anywhere in the Panhandle. So we got up north of Dalhart, and that's when about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. That's when the first storm went up, and we're pretty excited. Hey, we got a storm. Let's go ahead and chase it. So we did. We got way out west towards the New Mexico border, and this is where the fun begins. Well, this is about 4 o'clock. This is the base of the storm. My pictures aren't that great, but you can see a pretty ragged wall cloud, some low-level features and stuff that went on through the day. And then eventually there was a whole line of storms popping up. There was a line of supercells from southeast Colorado extending down to eastern New Mexico. So we decided to go due south. Well, going due south in Dallam County is a very bad thing because way out there, the only road we had was this dirt road that eventually turned into like a really loose sand road with a lot of big like mounds of sand in that area. So I got my little 4-cylinder 97 Nissan, and I'm like I turned it into like a Baja truck, and I'm just like going over all the mounds of sand and whatnot. Well, eventually we get to that very southern storm, and this is what that base looked like. It looked decent on radar, but that's what the base literally looked like. I mean, there's nothing. There's hardly an updraft. There's hardly a base. There's nothing there. And you can see how the sun is way down here, so it's already getting late in the day. Well, hold on, I bet this is easier. Yeah, there we go. It'd be easier if I did that. Sorry. So I was like, all right, well, let's just whatever. We'll call it a day. Let's go ahead and start heading out. Well, as we started getting, this is another view of that storm. This is what the storm started out to look like. All right. So we're driving towards Dalhart, and the winds kick up really, really bad, like just really strong southeasterly winds. It was very obvious that the low-level jet was coming in really hot. And sure enough, it's heading to, like, if you just point your direction, it's going right towards that storm. Well, a few minutes later, we get going, and this is now the storm, the same exact storm. The base is growing. It's getting a beaver tail. Well, we get closer to Dalhart, and this is the storm now. It's got a very large base. You can see the base down here, a very large beaver tail, and the updraft is very, very much in play here. And if you keep going, we kept going towards it around sunset. You could see the base is huge way out here. It's actually off screen. And there's just these towers going up, right into it. And the sun was setting on that day, but I zoomed way in and we actually saw this little funnel, and it actually turned into a tornado, and it actually touched down, but I didn't get a good picture of it. And then this is the same storm. You can see the big ingestion of another cell, basically, a big inflow ingestion here. Big beaver tail out here. There's a lowering right here in the middle, and the base is there. Well, eventually the thing produces another tornado. And not just any tornado, but it produced a tornado with a satellite way off in the distance. So this was a great day in all. And eventually that tornado lifted. And then as we got closer to text line, we followed the storm. This isn't a great shot, but this is the shot I got. There's a tornado down here, and there's the updraft and whatnot. This is pretty close to Dart. But it produced another tornado out by text line. And that tornado ended up growing, pretty substantial in size. Out by text line. This is long exposure shots, so it looks a little blurry, but there's actually a large tornado here and a satellite here. So all in all, 5 tornadoes on one day, on a day that I didn't think really much was going to happen. Not only that, but that day was also my mom's birthday, so I totally blew off her birthday to go chase. But she was totally cool with it as long as I got some cool shots, and I got some good video too. But that goes back to something I think, James and I were talking about last night, where you just, those minuscule days, those days that don't look the best, the days that are kind of low on your priorities in terms of chasing, those are the days you really can't discount because you do get really great surprises from that day. So I definitely don't really pay attention to tornado outlooks as much as I used to. As if there's a 2%, that's actually a good sign for me. That makes me think, hey, there's a chance. So that's kind of how I take it if I ever look at SPC. So that's pretty much my one surprise day. I mean, I had my other surprise day in Spearmint. I keep talking about the sunset tornadoes. I'm sure everyone's tired of that story, but that was also another surprise day. I think it was 2% tornado risk in that Panhandle, and that storm spit out 5 tornadoes also, I believe, or 4 tornadoes. I'm sorry, 4. So, hey, it's just that Camp Rock magic that we always talk about. And I know you miss it so much, don't you, Chris?
That's a term I haven't heard in a long time.
Well, it's probably because we haven't had Camp Rock magic in quite a long time as it is. But, I've definitely experienced it, and I understand it now. I understand why it's such a big deal, because those days that look so crappy, or you can just totally blow off any other day. And those are some of the days that really catch your attention, and they'll come up and surprise you. So, um, anyone have any other good stories that they want to share with the rest of the group? No?
My career is pretty dull when it comes to that.
Well, I've been lucky so far, knock on wood. Haven't hit any animals while chasing. I've definitely come pretty close to hitting rabbits and deer and raccoons and tumbleweeds the size of my car. Yeah. Oh, well, okay. That's a funny story, real quick. I'll tell you that. May 23rd, 2011, which is the day before High Risk Day in Oklahoma, we chased out near the Wichita Mountains. Me and Brady and a couple of his friends, and oh, this is great. Well, the first surprise is when we're watching the storm from the south, and the storm's ingesting really strong inflow. We had this. We basically parked the Jeep, over here, and then we were standing like off behind it, watching, the storm. Well, this tumbleweed, probably about 4 foot in diameter, was on its side, and it was tumbling end over end. It actually went right. It split us between the truck and us, and it was hauling ass towards that storm. And I actually got video of it just tumbling away in that field. And then the next surprise is we kind of forgot how southeast moving storms work, and that's if you're southeast of the actual bear's cage or the updraft base, you're probably going to get hailed on. And so we had Brady's Jeep and totally smashed it with baseball-sized hail because we were trying to get away from the storm. And I've never heard Brady cuss so much in one day than that day right there.
I remember he has video of that, and it's just bleep, 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 bleep for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I got video of it. I actually have it on my YouTube channel where he's like, oh man, my dad's gonna fucking kill me and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think he was he was still a senior in high school. So, yeah, he could have been in big trouble with that. So, oh man, well, if you guys got no other surprises, maybe you guys.
Well, yeah,
can,
I kind of got a good hail story. Is anybody familiar with the big hailstorm from April 5th of 2003? Moved across north Texas. Dropped a lot of softball-sized hail pretty much over the course of 8 hours. It wound up doing a lot of damage at a DFW airport. Did a lot of damage to the wings of airplanes out there. But that was my junior year. Yeah, my junior year at OU, and I had gone home for spring break a couple weeks earlier and rear-ended somebody on my way home. So over spring break, I wound up with having to get the hood and grill replaced in my Mystique. And my car wasn't ready yet when I went back to school. So I had taken my dad's truck, and he brought it to me when it was ready over a weekend, and it happened to be weekend. I was like, oh, I can go out and we'll go out and storm chase this weekend. Got nothing better to do. Got all my homework done, all that, nothing going on. So we went out there, and brand new hood, brand new grill, $3,500, and proceeded to get pounded by baseballs and golf balls for 3 hours. Oops.
Oops. Yep. Yeah, definitely.
I will say this: with all the hail that I've been in, I know I'm going to curse myself by doing this. I have never lost a windshield.
And you were setting yourself up for it now.
Yeah, this is going to be the year where you're sitting at the weather service and the big softball-sized hail event's going to roll right through Shreveport and take out your car.
It's kind of funny. You mentioned that there's a lot of I know several people that work for the weather service that because trade-in value on vehicles can be not very good sometimes, so they'll keep their old car, and it's their severe weather car that they'll drive to the office and leave it in the parking lot while their newer, nicer cars at home in the garage. That way they get their severe weather car crapped on by the hail at work. Whenever I go and I show up and I see all this severe weather cars in the parking lot, I go, great, this is gonna be a long day.
Something might happen that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said that for a long time. I've actually been through some of the craziest hail, big hail events in my car. I'm trying to think what was the biggest hail I've driven through. Oh, I remember on May 30th, 2012, I was down by Paducah,
Yeah,
Texas.
dude. Those supercells were dropping some monstrous hail.
Yeah, the storm that has been, dubbed the Cottle County Earth Eater because of the way that base looked. Um, Yeah, we got okay. That's a big surprise, I guess. That's a good story because we were actually playing around with that storm really close, and eventually we were like, all right, we need to escape out of here. And I think we were like southeast of Paducah, and that storm was heading right towards us. Well, we couldn't go north and then east again. I'm sorry, we were southwest of Paducah. We couldn't go north and east again, or else we'd run right into the hail core. So we had to take a dirt road south, and so I was with my friend Jake, and we're trying to haul ass in my Mazda, and I love this Mazda. It's a nice Mazda, and it was a Speed 6, so it's a nice looking car. It's kind of rare, and so I'm hauling ass down this dirt road. I'm shifting hard. I'm trying to get going, and then about 2 miles down the road from pavement, there's this huge tree that's blocking the road that got knocked down. And I was like, oh man, I was like, dude, we got to try to get back and go the other way. So we tried to go back the other way, and by that time the hail was like starting to come in towards us. And I was like, all right, well, there's one chance. We saw a farm on this dirt road. I was like, maybe they have some sort of shelter. Well, we drive up and we get right up to that front gate, and the gates are like closed and they're locked. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me! Like, how do people live here with the locked gate? And well, we had to just sit through that hailstorm. Softball size hail. I mean, probably good 4-inch plus diameter hailstones falling around us. I got like two or three actually on the car. They were kind of sporadic. But it's funny how that storm didn't take out my windshield. But last year, on April 9th of last year, I chased this little crap storm north of Amarillo in October, dropping 2-inch diameter hail. And that's what took out my windshield was the 2-inch hailstone. Not all the 3-inch plus hailstones I've gone through. It's that little, yeah, 2-inch diameter hailstone.
That's the it's like the bigger the stone is, I mean, they cover less area. It's just if you get hit with one of those, you're losing not only the windshield, but your dash is going to get messed up big time. It's always those like 2.5 inches to 2-inch that always get you.
Yeah, because those are usually just solid ice. They're just like boulders of ice. So, well, I guess now that my windshield's been taken out, I don't mind taking it out some more. Whatever. It's gonna have to get replaced anyway, right?
Right.
So, all right. So, well, guys, great show tonight. Lots of very good information that we put into the show. I hope a lot of people go back and watch the show because there was a lot of good information, a lot of good opinions too on some of the discussions. Before we sign off tonight, though, of course, we have our super accurate tornado predictions of 2015. And I think your career's on the line with this one, Chris, because we're going to be predicting how many tornadoes drop here in the U.S. this year in 2015. So, Chris, we'll start with you. What's the number? What tornado number do you think we're going to have?
I don't even want to hazard a guess. Probably. I don't even know what the normal number is off the top of my head. It's hard enough keeping track of just the area I'm in. I would guess that it's probably going to be probably close to a near normal season. It seems like we've had a decently wet winter across a lot of the plains. It hasn't been just abnormally wet or abnormally dry. It's been kind of somewhere in the middle. So I think the moisture ought to be there. It's just going to be dependent on, if we can get the right synoptic setup. So I think it'll probably, I bet it'll probably be kind of, on the whole, kind of an average year. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the activity, focused more in one area versus the other. It seems to kind of do that, from year to year.
Okay. Well, so throw a number out there on tornado count. I think, James, what's the average? Like 1,250?
Somewhere in there. It's 1,200-ish or 1,100-ish.
Yeah. The reason
I can probably go with that.
well, the reason I
About-
say a number, the reason I want you to pick a number is we're gonna have like a prize at the end of the year for whoever actually nails it. The number of tornadoes. So
okay. So are we going with individual confirmed tornadoes or tornado reports on SPC?
whatever the SPC comes up with, all right.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit different. Yeah, I'll go with 1100. Nice, easy number.
Actually, that was my number, so you got to choose again. Don't price
We'll
is
make
right,
this like
man. I'm gonna be pissed.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to do. I was like 1101.
Oh man. All right. Well, you know what? That's legit. I guess I don't need to be winning my own trophy, right? So.
Marcus, don't allowed to have your own trophy. That's gonna be my trophy.
Okay.
Oh,
You
yeah?
know what? I'll go a little bit easy then. I'll go lower. I'll go 1050 then.
All right. 1050 is not taken. By the way, that would put you as the lowest guess, unless Ashley guesses lower. Yeah, 1050. James has the most. He thinks we're gonna have 1,400 tornadoes. So.
This has no scientific basis as far as my guess goes. So.
Oh,
can't
it
hold
always.
me to this.
Yeah, actually, we can. I'm just kidding.
Hold on. Let me go outside and sniff the dirt in my front yard, and I'll give
There
you
you
a better
go.
answer.
There you go.
If your number's not based solely on science, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to win the prize. Then it has to be only the most exact science.
Exactly. All right. Well, Ashley, so let's get your number. What's your number for tornadoes that we'll have in this year?
I'm going to go with 999.
Ooh, the
Because
first
there's-
sub 1,000 number we've had.
Just because there's a backstory to a certain sequence of numbers I see. So I'm going to go with 999.
999, Bob. We'll see how she does. So, James, did we figure out a prize for these people that are actually going to win? Or I'm definitely going to look into making a trophy. Like, I know you can get custom-made trophies, and we're going to make one that's called the Nostradamus of tornado forecasting.
We definitely do that, and then I'll give you my little high five certificate. So if you ever see me, you can come get your one free high five.
Oh, that's so lame.
Yeah. No, hey, it's way better than the trophy. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll tell you what. Okay, whatever. If you come to Amarillo, I'll buy you a steak or something. I don't know. We'll figure something out.
I'll buy you a keychain.
There you go. I thought I had something good, but maybe we'll send you a little pet tornado too.
Oh yeah. This too can be yours.
Exactly. There it is.
That looks like the one I got when I graduated.
Yeah, they sell them at the Weather Center actually.
Yeah, that was the gift that they gave me when I walked across the stage. Besides my diploma, I got that and a copy of the Severe Convective Storms book.
And all those prizes will be hand delivered by Shane Adams. So
apparently someone just threw in a thing. Apparently you get to caress my beard if you win. So I guess that's a prize. I'm not quite sure.
Maybe that's what you need to grow into that patch. You need someone to caress that patch.
It'd be my lucky patch.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So, cool. Now that Ashley has the lowest count number, but it's actually probably closer to realism than, well, some of us are, especially James.
Hey, whatever.
Jeff, you chose 1350, so you were aiming pretty high too.
10,000 is my new guess.
10,000 tornadoes.
Man, he's going for all of it.
Might as well. Go big or go home.
That's right. Well,
now you guys do realize that you asked someone to give you a guess that issues LSRs and tornado reports, right?
You have a conflict of interest.
Oh, so you're gonna make
not
sure
saying
you
that
get...
I could, not saying that but just saying.
So you're gonna try to make sure, you're gonna try everything you can to make sure 1050 happens. So
I didn't say that. I just threw out there that I issue, storm reports. So
can you imagine calling into the weather service? Hey, I got this tornado on the ground. No, you don't. I see it right now. No, you don't. No, you don't. Sorry, you got the wrong number.
We're 1049.
We got the seat. 949. Okay, I'll take one more.
Why did all those houses lose their roofs? It was just a little bit of wind, a little gust.
Straight line win. Straight line win.
Aliens.
There's signs wrapped. Yeah, aliens. Hey, you know, down there in Louisiana, you know, you drink enough moonshine, and that's what's causing everything is aliens, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Before we head off, also, we're gonna let you guys kind of pimp yourselves out, nice and cheaply, with any websites you got, any social media handles. Definitely let everyone know where they can find you. So, we'll start with you, Ashley. Where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Facebook or on Twitter at Ash Polling.
That's a bit of a tongue twister.
A little bit of a tongue twister.
Well, cool. How about you, Chris? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I kind of infrequently post on there. Usually it's stuff about Thunder basketball, OU football, and occasional weather stuff. Yeah, you can find me on there as at Nutty FTW, or Nutty for the win for everybody that's you know, in the interweb speak.
All right, very good. James, we don't need to know where you're at. All right, well, we'll get to you later, James. All right, how about you, Jeff?
I am on Facebook. I don't really have a special page. I just have a personal one. I don't have a Twitter account, so you won't find me there. I do have a little bit of a storm chasing, just sort of a highlights and accounts page. If you can see my screen right now, I have the URL up here. I actually just used some of the space on my old Iowa State meteorology account there, so it's kind of a long URL, but there's all my stories from the last few years there.
Cool. I'm sure they can probably look you up on your just look your name up maybe and probably find it pretty easy.
Perhaps. If you're on Storm Track, I also link in my signature. I have a link to this stuff.
All right, cool. Yeah, James, go ahead and pimp your stuff out like you do every week.
I mean, I am the biggest man whore on this show, so my blog is thunderingskies.blogspot.com. It's usually just got little non-scientific chasing bullshit posts on there during the off season. I do chase logs throughout the year that actually think I still need to do one more to get caught up. And it'll have pictures, brief accounts, full accounts. I'll usually update it about once every week during the winter, so feel free to check it out. Most of the posts on there, you know, take them with a grain of salt. They're not usually scientifically based. It's mostly just me bitching. So, you know, if that's your thing, then go ahead and check it out. If not, then well, go fuck off. But
well, if they're not scientifically based, you can't win the trophy. You just told me this.
No nonsense. You heard nothing.
Okay, well, you can find me there. I got it right there on the bottom, txwxchaser.smugmud.com. I've been using it as a photo gallery, but I've slowly started to convert it into like a chaser account with some stories and whatnot. And I've actually been spending this off season going way back, all the way from 2008, getting pictures from 2008 all the way until you know, even stuff from last year I'm still working on. So man, getting photos uploaded is so tedious. I swear, but it'll all be there, and hopefully I'll be able to fill it up this year. So, and hopefully I'll be able to actually buy that domain. Don't buy it for me because I don't want to buy it off of you. But one of these days I'm going to buy that domain and actually make it a legitimate website. So we'll see. Anyway, guys and girls, thank you for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate you coming on. So we hope to see you guys again. Jeff, of course, you're always welcome to come back.
Thanks.
Chris, you too. You can always come back and come back to the Panhandle sometime. Come chase back up here again.
I was out there last year on my way to a Colorado vacation, and lo and behold, I was greeted with a tornadic cell crossing I-40, so I had to pull over at the rest stop out there and wait for it to pass. So I got my welcome back to the Panhandle that night.
No, there you go. Oh, actually, who was it? Oh, Wesley wanted to do a show with you and Steve Miller, Texas, and him, and we can just call it the Storm Killers of the Panhandle. reunion.
Hey, I think my chases, my last 3 chases in 2013, are proof that those talents have left me. I was on tornado-warned storms each consecutive day, so.
So it was either you or Steve that had that curse here in the Panhandle, or I mean, not you or Steve, Wesley or Steve, that had that curse of killing tornadoes and killing storms. So, well, cool.
Like me, I'm not there anymore, so.
Yeah, it's not you. I think it's Wesley, to be honest. So, all right. Yeah, thank you, Ashley, also for being on. You're always welcome to come on and let us know your opinions and whatnot.
Yeah, especially if we have anything with Dixie Alley. Any Dixie Alley input.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be, we're going to have one show probably that's going to say how much we hate chasing Dixie Alley. That's probably down the line somewhere.
Yep.
So actually, I really do want to try to chase Dixie Alley one time, to say I've done it and to say that I hate it, and so that I never have to do it again. Like I need to get it out of my system. So, all right. Well, if that's everything, if no one else has anything to go for, everyone, I think next week or the week after, we're gonna have the new storm track come to life, and I've seen some really cool things on that website. So much so that I think it's going to start pulling people away from their Facebook groups and whatnot and just kind of start using StormTrack. It's almost like StormTrack's becoming a social media website strictly for storms and storm chasing. So that's kind of cool. There's a lot of cool features. We're working on a ChaserCon episode next week. I'm not sure if that's happening yet. I got to get in contact with Skip. He'll know for sure. He's going to be the one kind of our correspondent up there in Denver. We've tossed around some ideas on what we're going to do, but we'll let you guys know on Twitter and Facebook how that's going to work out. And in fact, I'll go ahead and put the Twitter handle up here. Then the week after that, which should hopefully be the release of the new storm track, we'll have Steamboat Oklahoma along with a couple other people that have basically designed the website. They're going to come on the show. We're going to have a show basically having them discuss everything that there is on the website, all the different features, all the different sections and different media centers and stuff like that are going to be available at your fingertips. They're going to go through it. It's going to be a great educational show to showcase what the new storm track is, and we hope everyone's there to join us. I'm pretty sure that show's going to get pimped out pretty hard. So can't wait to kind of go over that, because I can't wait to get on the new storm track. I don't know about you guys, but it sounds like it's a really cool website.
It looks really awesome.
Yeah, it does. It looks really cool. I've seen Steve's kind of snuck out a few screenshots of what we got coming, and they're really cool. So, well, we hope you guys have a great evening. I hope you guys enjoyed the Grammys. I didn't watch because that's probably what you were doing instead of watching this, and or The Walking Dead, apparently, as I was told. So
we're way better.
Yeah, our view count may be a little lower, but the quality is there for a much better show. So, if that's it, we'll go ahead and sign off, and we hope you guys have a good night, have a good week. We'll see you here next week.
Have a good night, guys.